Hi everyone, so I'm Carney and I'm looking at what is effective feedback for teachers. So my rationale, I decided to use a case study to examine the factors which impact the effectiveness of feedback that's given to teachers, so after learning walks or observations. I kind of came to this for my dissertation from my MA journey, so I've done all of the modules for the last 2 years because I'm not an NQT. So I did a literature review, and the literature looked at what is CPD for teachers and how should schools approach it. And then I took on a minor project looking at learning walks and looking at the extent to which they contribute to teacher professional development. I'm at a school where I've been for about 8 years, and it does have a progressive CPD model where teacher research is encouraged, and in fact 2 members of my SLT are here today in the room, so no pressure. And at the moment, last year July, there was from the DFE a standard for teachers' professional development was published from the teachers' professional expert group. So all of this came at a time when CPD had quite a large focus, and we were looking, well I wasn't, the group was looking in terms of what is happening with CPD and kind of giving these standards to schools, although they weren't statutory as such, so it's not necessarily that all schools are following. My school context, so it's an average mixed 11 to 16 urban community school, so it's comprehensive in South East England, predominantly white working class, and I'd say with a low socio-economic status. 89% of pupils are categorised as white British, which is above national average. 23.8% of pupils with free school meals, and 14.8% of pupils have SEN, and that's above the national average for SEN as well. Sorry, mind your way. And if we look at in terms of attainment in old money, last year we had 63% getting 5 A star to C's, including maths and English, which in terms of attainment 8 is 5.11, whereas the national figure was 4.84, which is looking at what would be deemed a kind of C grade. So that's the school context in which the research is happening. So I've completed a literature review, but we'll still be going back to it and working on it. And the literature review had kind of, I would say, 6 key areas that I discovered and themes. So career stage was one, career stage of a teacher. And I looked at Huberman's work there, who's seen these 5 different phases in kind of going from 1 to 3 years, 4 to 6, 7 to 18, and then you go 19 to 30, and then kind of above that. And with that, the last 2 stages, he says, have a reduced desire for CPD, and I was kind of looking at that with this research. And Day and Sachs have said that when you're in 10 to 15 years of experience, you potentially have the greatest expertise, but you also might have personal health concerns coming out and family concerns. So there's kind of this conflict between home and kind of work as well. Sorry for that affects anyone there, but we'll see, does my research actually match that? There's the issues of gender, and it was really interesting to hear what you were saying there, Jess. So we've got the idea of how women receive feedback, and Heil and Cram have suggested that women anticipate more negative responses than men, but that's from both women and men when they're getting feedback. And Robertson suggests that you should have gender-sensitive approaches when giving feedback. In addition, there's the idea that CPD should be personalised, which is mentioned in the DFE standard, and also there's the idea that there could be a tension though between this individual personalised feedback that you might want to choose as a teacher against the whole school development plan, and do those things work together? Is it actually possible in reality? Then of course you've got accountability for teaching and CPD, so you've got your accountability in terms of perhaps GCSE grades, SATs and so on. You've also got your accountability in terms of your performance management, where you have targets, you might have a CPD target. And Furlong has, in the last few years, mentioned the new professionalism and how you've got competition within schools, within teachers across and within departments, nationally set targets imposed from above. Whilst also you might have the responsibility towards the children, you've got responsibility perhaps towards yourself and your department as well. But are the standards put in place? Again, to the question, is it quality assurance? Is it actually helping the children there to make sure that teaching's at the level it should be? And again, you've got kind of debates going on with that. And then the last couple, I've got how to give feedback. Should it be a team building exercise? There's looking at the ways in which you give it. There's quite a few kind of authors focused actually mainly at senior leadership, I would say the books are aimed at, who kind of give you tips on how to give feedback. Should it be constructive? The concern of you might get negative responses from people, and that can be something that then makes people be very worried about kind of taking part in observations and learning walks. Trust, are you going to focus on their strengths, their weaknesses when giving feedback? Is it something that's dialogic or is it something more written? And in addition, you've got the idea of CPD as an ongoing process. Is it a one-off, it ticks a box, we did it on an inset day, or is it something that continues to happen? So back in '93, Brinko suggested it should be repeated instances of feedback in order to change people's self-perceptions and beliefs. Indeed, the standard, the CPD standard, does suggest it should be sustained and that it should work for over 2 terms. But of course, again, you've got another tension, which is time and money and the school's budget at the moment perhaps being squashed for CPD and these sorts of actions. So, my research questions. So I've got 4, but I'm only really going to focus on 2 when I look at kind of what I've come out with so far. So what is effective feedback for teachers? That's the umbrella question. How do contextual factors influence the effectiveness of feedback? Question 3, how does the form of feedback impact its effectiveness? And 4, do teachers perceive feedback in different or similar ways? So I'm going to look at these first 2 in particular. So, my research design. So I am an interpretive researcher, so then I know that identity is critical to the production of knowledge and about the complexities of the social world, which I've taken from Dunn, Pryor and Yates, so feel free to have a look at that one. Also an insider researcher. So who am I? Well, I'm female, white, British, middle class. I was educated at a comprehensive school and I'm a firm believer in that style of education. So these have all kind of had an impact on who I am. I'm also a student of humanities in terms of my degree many years ago, and I have a tendency towards left-winger ideas. So this is going to impact, I think, how I interpret different bits and bobs that come out of my research. As an insider researcher, it is a local experience, so I teach modern languages. I'm also the staff governor. I'm a teacher, I'm a colleague, I'm a student at the university. I might be a friend to some of them. I'm also an advocate for disadvantaged students as well, and I firmly believe that those students really deserve the best from teachers and community. And then the case study. I chose a case study. It's a real context. It is quite specific to my school. And there's a debate around case studies as to how much you can then relate them to other areas. Are they actually generalisable or relatable tends to be a term which is more positively used. You get quite a lot of criticism on case studies from those of a positivist kind of interpretation. But I've gone with it. So, I'm also doing mixed methods research to get in-depth data. I have got, say, a larger sample of questionnaires, a smaller sample of interviews. So I've got a bit of qualitative, which is kind of my go-to. I feel really comfortable with words, and quantitative, where I'm a bit more, well, you'll see later, but I'm not as confident, let's say. Ethics is important, and this is where I've got my B, because I feel that we're working together. And you know, whilst I'm a B, I'm not going to get very far on my own. I need these people to be on board, and they're choosing to be on board because it's been an opt-in kind of process. I've gone with the BERA guidelines in order to make sure that it's where it should be. It's informed consent, so people have made the choice to join in. They've given me written consent as well. I've got their permission to record the interviews, and I'm making sure that things are anonymous and that any evidence is kept confidential. Also, I see myself as a B because I'm taking from the research that's already out there. I'm getting guidance on research design from all these other people, so I'm taking their pollen and then putting it into this, but I am working together, I feel, with the other people within my school, and that is important to me. My research design, phase 1 was an online questionnaire. It seems like an eternity ago. I had 32 teacher respondents from a possible 67. Phase 2, I then had observations with 4 pairs of teachers, and phase 3 is the interviews of these teachers, but separately, so there were 8 interviews. The questionnaire had Likert scale questions, open, closed questions. It was online, and it was then sequential to then inform my interviews later on. So I looked at this data before I did this section. With the pairs, I had 8 teachers who said they'd like to be a part of it. I kind of advertised it in staff briefing in our 15-minute forum. I put letters in pigeonholes, I emailed, and so I had 8 people who were able to do it with their timetables and felt willing to do so. And they were allowed to choose their pair, so I wanted them to feel they had some ownership, so they chose who they worked with from kind of the list I had, and they did, quite good thankfully for me, they worked across career stages, so you might have had an NQT with a member of SLT. They also were given the choice of feedback as to how they would give the feedback to each other in their pairs, so they might have chosen verbal feedback or written feedback, and I asked that observations last at least 15 minutes because on my previous minor project that was something that was mentioned in terms of the learning walks, that perhaps a very short observation wasn't necessarily long enough to really get to grips with giving feedback that people felt was relevant and of use. So some people did 15 minutes, others did, I think, up to 30-minute observations, and that was agreed with some of them in advance, others not so much. And then I did the interviews, again with 8. They lasted 10 to 20 minutes, and I allowed the interviewees to choose where they took place so that they felt comfortable, and again they could have some ownership of when it happened. And I used semi-structured interview questions, so I had a bit of an guidance. I sent that to them in advance so they could think about it, and also I could then add to that where necessary and kind of probe a little bit more. So my findings, I've been doing this in the last couple of weeks, and it's an ongoing process, and I'm not completely finished with this. So I've been using inductive and deductive coding. I find it really hard. I've done a literature review, I've done hours of reading and writing. It's hard to not have that in my mind when I'm going through the coding. It is there. But I have used Tesh's 8-step guide to coding, so going through these different 8 processes. And so looking at contextual factors, which was my research question number 2, I've come up with looking at career stage and experience, which kind of linked. Again, kind of linked to status and hierarchy of the teacher. You've got trust between teachers and the school as a whole, and then gender of the staff members. So findings, how do contextual factors influence the effectiveness of feedback? So these are just some of my juicy quotes from the interviews. So we've got participant 1, who is would come in career category 4, so quite experienced there. Yeah, inevitably he's an NQT, so you think, well, okay, what sort of depth of the observation is he going to get to? But it didn't feel as though that was a barrier, so we've got someone kind of acknowledging that the person who has observed them might not have as much experience, as much knowledge. Participant 2, who was the partner of 1, to be honest, he's been teaching a lot longer, so I think he knows more about teaching in general than I do, so he's showing that he values the experience, but also perhaps highlighting his, what he might perceive to be a weakness in terms of his knowledge. And then participant 4, who was NQT plus 1, I think it's quite hard for someone who's only been teaching for 2 years to give feedback to someone who's been teaching for 10, 15 years, because you always feel you're overstepping a boundary. And I thought that was really interesting, the idea that, are you allowed to give feedback to that person? Is it okay? Which is something that, again, perhaps came up in status and hierarchy. So participant 3, who worked with participant 4, they're all paired. I'd like to say that it doesn't. This is if status has an impact, but I've got a feeling it might. And I really got this vibe where people who had the status didn't want it to impact on how they were perceived and the feedback, but they had this underlining feeling that it would have an impact. And I think then the kind of responses from those who were at a lower career stage in terms of only 1 to 3 years experience, that they did mention that had an impact to a certain extent. Participant 8, very experienced member of staff, had been at school a long time, felt quite let down in terms of not getting an EBI, and said he might have felt, oh, I don't dare give him an EBI, and the idea that perhaps there's a concern, a worry of what could happen afterwards. You know, are we really on a level playing field? Is there going to be something that happens afterwards if I give this suggestion? How is the relationship and even the trust? And participant 6 has kind of got assumptions. So obviously if you're in, and I've taken them away for confidentiality, and SLT, well then you assume almost that you're going to get good feedback, or that they're going to know what they're looking for. So you do perhaps have these assumptions of people within these certain positions within the school that they do have the knowledge, but kind of verbal feedback. So if we look here in terms of status and hierarchy, we've got the different career stages across here and whether they felt it was important or not. And a lot of people felt status wasn't important in particular. If you look across here, there's not so many down here, and the not important has got more, kind of more people going for it. But I would say that contradicts some of the actual written feedback that some of these people actually then wrote when they gave their reasons. They might have contradicted their numbers and their answers, and in the interviews I wouldn't say it matched particularly well with this. But of course some of the people who participated in this could well have been the people I interviewed as well. Then I broke it down to male, female, and you can see here for males it seems slightly more important, status and hierarchy, than for women. But again, the numbers are quite low in terms of how many took part. In addition, what is effective feedback for teachers? So my first research question. So these are just some of the keywords that came up time and time again across both male and female responses, because I broke them down into career stage and gender. So achievable, they want something they can actually get to for their feedback when you're getting a target. Constructive, the way it's given to you, it wants to feel positive. Skillful, that's in terms of how you're giving it back to someone. A lot of people talked about the way you give feedback and how people perceive it, and again that linked to the coaching style. That was quite a popular response, and people would like a coaching style, a dialogue when getting their feedback. And then verbal and written. Now this was something where I really feel for staff it varies massively. I did think beforehand there would be a greater emphasis towards the verbal, but often people wanted a bit of both. And you can see here in terms of verbal feedback, 6 people are saying it's extremely effective. Written feedback's only got 2 saying it's extremely effective, so you can see the differences there. But also within the career stage as well. So you can see you've got quite a few. Hang on, which was it? Yeah, I mean it's quite similar across both. This one's slightly more spread out, the new challenges and concerns, which is age 7, experience of 7 to 18 years. But generally speaking, verbal and written seems both popular. No one thinks they're not effective at all, but it might be that the person who is getting the feedback really wants a choice in how they should have that feedback given to them. But there are some limitations. So for example, relatability, it is very much focused on my school, the people who work there, the teachers at this particular place. But I would be interested in maybe going to another school, doing it again at a different stage. Of course, each year you have new staff come in, you have other staff leave, so it is something that would change. Obviously, I'm an interpreter of this, so I'm putting my views. As you know, I could see people looking at the data, you might interpret it differently. Quotes, you might view them in a different way to I do. I know the people who have said these quotes, and I'm aware of them and their backgrounds to a certain extent. And of course there were power relations going on there, so I was interviewing people who were higher than me in terms of hierarchy, and that may well have had an impact in terms of how I've interpreted the research and the type of answers they give me. Also, with some of the less experienced staff, they may see me as someone who's well positioned within the school and may be concerned at some of the responses they give me. Or they may not. I tried to limit that as much as I could, but at the end of the day I probably won't ever know that. Range of participants. The other thing that was a slight concern was that I didn't have many part-time teachers who took part in the interviews. In fact, I only had one, and that was a male, whereas the vast majority of part-time teachers are female, so I do feel their voice could be lacking from the interviews in particular. So my tentative recommendations is that you need to view the teacher as a professional, and you need to view them as a researcher as well. There's a debate within kind of educational research, looking at teachers. Are they kind of a technicist in which they're doing practical things, or are you the professional? Are you researching, going beyond that? And I very much see a teacher as a professional and who should be researching within their school and within their subject or whatever it is. I would like to see more paired and group observations at my school, rather than perhaps the learning walk as it currently is. This allows you to create the relationships that are really good, so that people do give feedback and then they work on that feedback and actually respond to it. I think staff need to have choice so that they can choose a focus, they can choose when the observations take place, which class, helps the confidence again. But there is a need for training on how to give feedback. It's not something that we naturally necessarily know how to do. And again, could well lead to further research.